Hi, everybody. This is a screencast about incorporating evidence. We're going to focus on the two ways that you can incorporate evidence into formal academic writing in our history class. So have a piece of notebook paper out and be ready to write down what those two ways would be. So I'm going to show you a table here. And in this table, we have the two methods that we're going to focus on in our course and for other social studies courses as you progress up through 12th grade. On the left-hand side, you'll see that I wrote direct quotation or direct citation. Just be comfortable with the two different ways that people might refer to this method. This is when a text has embedded the exact words from a source into one's writing using quotation marks. Quotation marks are important because they're telling your reader this phrase or this piece of information is as it is exactly found in the source that I'm referring to. Why would someone use direct quotation, you wonder? Well, you use direct quotation when two things happen. Number one, you feel like you need to relay the information exactly as you found it because that articulation that an author has included or that quotation from a person who experienced that event is just so important for your reader to see as it appeared originally. You know, picture an article in a newspaper about an accident that happened. You know, maybe the reporter interviews eyewitnesses. Maybe those quotations from eyewitnesses are much more powerful for the reader rather than the reporter summarizing it in their own words. So think about what would be the most rich experience for your reader, and then you would determine, should I use direct quotation? Many times we want to use paraphrase because paraphrase is a way to really integrate things like specific facts. For example, you know, the date that this accident occurred or how many people were involved or the time that it happened or the place that it occurred. We also want to integrate very specific information. For example, if somebody was reporting on the COVID-19 pandemic, they might use statistics from the information provided from the Department of Health. For example, there were 612 new cases, there were 37 deaths. That doesn't necessarily need to be in direct quotations, but our reader has to know where that information came from. So we would include a citation at the end of that sentence to indicate that we retrieve that information from official government documents and or another article. So again, direct quotation is when you're going to use quotation marks. You're using the exact wording from another source. Paraphrasing is when you're just integrating details, but you're using your own authentic voice. Let's look at some examples. In this slide, I have a quotation from a source, and I decided to use something that we've all studied, which is the invention of the printing press. So that way we're all on the same page. And this comes from an article titled Individualism, and it was written by somebody named Carrie J. Netterman. And that's important. You can see my MLA citation that would go in my works cited at the bottom of this slide. The quotation from the reading is, it's just one sentence here. The invention of the printing press and movable type in the mid-15th century immeasurably enhanced the ability of individuals to spread their ideas and made it possible for a larger public to access the written word. I love this sentence because it really has something that all of us can benefit from, which is this understanding that without this invention, we wouldn't have had the progress that we've had in terms of spreading the written word. How can we incorporate this into our presentation or our piece of writing without losing our own voice? The first thing we can do is use a direct quotation. Remember, that's when you use the exact words from a text. So here's an example. I've got my words, and then you'll see quotation marks, and this little nugget from the previous text, I'm just taking a little tiny bit and I'm putting it into my own sentence. With his invention of the printing press and movable type, Johann Gutenberg gave people the power to, quote, spread their ideas and made it possible for a larger public to access the written word, end quote, which served as a catalyst for learning. And then I included what we call the parenthetical citation at the end, the author's last name in parentheses. So by putting the quotation, and I've highlighted most of it here, by putting the quotation in the middle of my own sentence, I've been able to take that little piece of information from the Netterman article and integrate it seamlessly without interruption to my own writer's voice. If I just stuck that entire sentence in between two of my sentences, it would have felt weird because I'm not Carrie Netterman and we don't write the same. However, I really felt this concept of spreading ideas and making it possible for a larger public to access the written word. I really felt it was important for that phrase to be in my writing. I really love the way Carrie Netterman articulated that, and I couldn't figure out a way to write that without losing her voice. And also I felt like it was plagiarism. So I wanted to include that actual phrase. And notice how I put it in the middle of my sentence. And you might be wondering, well, could I start my sentence with this quotation or could I end my sentence with this quotation? Sure, the answer is. I just decided in this instance to embed it in the middle of my own sentence. What's an example of paraphrase? Well, again, the idea of that quotation is the fact that Gutenberg made it possible for people to access the written word. So I'm going to incorporate this using my own words. I'm going to avoid plagiarism, but I'm going to continue to support my ideas about why the printing press was so important by integrating something from my research. Gutenberg's invention of the movable type served as a catalyst for learning due to the fact that people were able to print their ideas and spread them to a larger audience than had ever been possible. And then notice how I put Netterman at the end. So again, the essence of that piece from Netterman's article was about how people were able to print and spread their ideas and that the larger public could access them. I was really careful not to say access the written word and say the larger public. Notice that I try to articulate and explain what Netterman had in the article without stealing Netterman's words. And again, that's where we want to avoid plagiarism. If you feel like you can't, that you're really struggling, then direct quotation is the method you want to use in that moment. Direct quotation can be a little dicey sometimes, though, because we run the danger of having so many direct quotations that your reader doesn't even know who you are as a writer. And that's why we want to just quote little phrases for direct quotation. We don't want to have big, full chunks and multiple lines in our writing. You know, if you look at someone's essay and it's going on to 3, 4, 5 lines of text is this quotation, your reader's going to be confused and your reader's going to say, where is the person who's writing? So direct quotation's important, but you want to use it sparingly. You don't want to use it so often that you lose your voice. That's why paraphrase is a really good method to weave in between those direct quotations. So I've already alluded a tiny bit of what to avoid, but the big thing that you really have to avoid in your writing is something that we call lonely quotes. Look how sad I am here, just feeling so down and out. What is a lonely quote? It's when somebody takes the entire sentence from Netterman's article and just sandwiches it in and plops it down with their own words before it and after it. So take a look at what I did here as an example of what not to do. My words say the printing press helped spread literacy, and then I've got the Netterman quote. The invention of the printing press and movable type in the mid-15th century immeasurably enhanced the ability of individuals to spread their ideas and made it possible for a larger public to access the written word. Without this invention, people would not have been able to advance their intellectual development. This doesn't look all bad. You know, you look at this and you think, okay, the student is doing the writing, they're incorporating evidence, but the problem is there is no flow. It just kind of is plopped there. So that's what we want to avoid. And while we're talking about lonely quotes, let's talk about multiple sentence lonely quotes. You don't want to do that either. Very oftentimes we see students integrate lonely quotes and then they put multiple sentences back to back in the middle of a paragraph. And they're full sentences with no introduction, no embedding within their own text. They're just plopped there. Think about this as a rule of thumb. If you could go into your writing and just remove the quotations and still have full length sentences that make sense back to back, then that quotation isn't embedded properly. When you go back to my example of direct quotation, if I were to pull this phrase out that's in quotation marks, this sentence would be grammatically incorrect. It wouldn't be a complete sentence. There's no punctuation. So again, the thing that you're quoting is actually quite vital to your sentence. Your sentence cannot exist without it. So that's a good way to check your work as well. So again, we want to avoid these lonely quotes and particularly multiple sentences. So to wrap it up here, let me go to my last slide. What are some of your big takeaways here? You must incorporate outside evidence. You cannot just write a historical informational paragraph or argumentative paragraph just on your own best guess common knowledge. You also have two choices. You can use direct quotation and paraphrase. The best pieces of academic writing incorporate both of these in a balanced way. The student integrates direct quotations, so we have real, live, living things from people who experienced the time period in primary sources and or other historians to corroborate or support the evidence that we're including. We also want to make sure that we're giving in-text parenthetical citations to both of these. You saw in both of my examples that I had Netterman's name in parentheses at the end of the sentence, whether it was direct quotation or paraphrase. And lastly, you're going to have to do both of these. So I am partial to one method over the other, and you might be too, but we want to learn both methods. So in this essay that we're going to be writing, you are going to integrate an example of a direct quotation and a paraphrase into each body paragraph. So at minimum, with two body paragraphs, one of each style in each, you're going to have 4 different pieces of evidence quoted. And what I mean by that, again, is you're going to have a direct quotation and you're going to have a paraphrase. When somebody looks at your essay, they're going to see 4 parenthetical citations at minimum. You are certainly able to do more, so long as we don't lose your voice, we don't lose your analysis, we still understand who you are and what you're trying to convey, and that you're using the evidence to enhance and support your claims, and that it's not just back-to-back quotes, but that the quotes are there to complement your claims and your examples.